My fiance left me after 7 years to marry his dying ex, but my doctor gave him the truth that night, like it happened yesterday. The rain was loud, the thunder was angry, and so was I. Owen had just walked out of our home to go comfort another woman. His ex. He said she was dying, that she needed him more than I did. I stood by the window, my hands trembling, staring into the storm while he drove away. 7 years of my life, 7 years of loyalty, love, and sacrifice, and in one night, it felt like it all drowned in the rain. Before we continue, please take a moment to leave a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. And please hit that like button for me right now and subscribe to my channel. We're building a community of people who know it's never too late to heal and find the truth. Now, back to my story. I can still hear the rain from that night hitting the windows of our house in Savannah, Georgia. It wasn't just rain, it was a fury, a massive screaming noise that made the thunder sound close enough to shatter the glass. But the worst noise was the quiet click of the front door closing behind him. Owen, the man who was supposed to be my husband in 2 weeks, had just left me alone in the middle of a lightning storm, a storm he knew I was terrified of, to go comfort Sabine, his ex. He drove away, and those red taillights disappearing into the downpour felt like the final brutal cut. 7 years we had built a life together, 7 years of shared dreams, and in one terrible second, it all became meaningless because a woman he used to date decided to stage a dramatic farewell. He said she was dying, that she needed his time more than I did, and that I should just understand. I stood there, watching the storm, my hands shaking so badly I had to clench them into fists. That quiet, empty house was suddenly the coldest place on earth, and I knew, deep down, that the woman who had come back into our lives wasn't dying. She was killing us, piece by calculated piece. Owen was the opposite of the man I needed that night. The Owen I knew always took care of me. He knew I was scared of thunder, and he would always be there, pulling me close and whispering low, gentle things until the storm passed. But that night, he wasn't gentle. He was impatient, annoyed that I wasn't being the understanding fiancé he expected. He was already halfway out the door when he threw the phrase that still burns, "Anya, don't be selfish. If this were you, I would do the same." That word, selfish, cut deeper than any knife. After everything I had sacrificed for our future, for him, he had the gall to call me selfish because I couldn't happily watch him give his loyalty to another woman, especially under the thinnest excuse of pity. I stayed awake all night, surrounded by the ghosts of our memories. The house still smelled like his cologne and the faint, sweet scent of the vanilla candle I always lit for him. But the smell was wrong now. It was contaminated by the memory of his quick, dismissive exit. Our unused wedding planner was still on the table, the pages already yellowing. I had picked out the venue and the flowers. We were supposed to be planning our honeymoon at Beacon Beach, the beautiful stretch of coast where we first talked about forever. That beach was supposed to be my prize, the place he promised to take me after I made the hardest choice of my life, the abortion. He had insisted we weren't ready for a baby. He said we needed to save more money and focus on our careers first. I listened to him and gave up that child, and he promised me the beach would be our place of healing. He never kept that promise to me. But now, Sabine had simply asked, "Take me to Beacon Beach one last time." And he had instantly agreed. The betrayal felt less about the woman and more about the blatant disregard for every single promise he had made me. I watched the clock tick toward morning, feeling heavier with every passing hour. I was numb, exhausted, and completely out of tears. I knew I couldn't stay there. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fight Sabine and her fake disease. That kind of battle would destroy me completely, turning me into the jealous lunatic she wanted him to see. As the first gray light of dawn pushed back the angry darkness, I realized I couldn't just walk away and try to forget him on my own. I had to do something drastic, something final. If he had erased me from his future, I would erase him from my past. The only way to win this war was to stop playing completely and eliminate the memory of the battlefield. By mid-morning, I was sitting across the desk from my physician, Dr. Silas, my eyes swollen but my expression completely determined. I asked her to erase him. Every memory of Owen Carmichael, 7 years of history, gone. She looked at me like I had lost my mind. "Anya," she said, her voice filled with gentle concern, "this is not how you heal a broken heart. You have to face the pain." But I was tired of facing the pain. I wanted silence. I wanted peace. I kept pushing, insisting that if she wouldn't help me, I would find someone who would. Finally, reluctantly, she agreed to the experimental memory treatment. But she gave me a warning. I would have a 7-day window to change my mind, or the wipe would become absolutely permanent. I signed the waivers without a second thought. I wasn't going to look back. But as the procedure began, one final cold thought sparked through my mind. I wasn't leaving without making sure the truth found Owen on the day he married the lie. Looking back on how Owen and I first met makes the ending hurt even more. It started 7 years ago, when I was 37 and had pretty much given up on finding a forever person. I was working long hours as a manager for a marketing company in New Orleans, Louisiana, and my heart had already been bruised too many times to risk it again. My beat-up old Honda decided to quit on me right near a noisy truck stop on the side of the highway. I was trying to change a flat tire, sweating and covered in grease, ready to cry out of frustration because the wrench just wouldn't budge. That's when I felt a shadow fall over me and heard a deep, calm voice say, "You look like you need a better wrench, or maybe just a less stressed approach." That was him, Owen Carmichael. He was tall and handsome, wearing a simple button-down, and he had a smile that felt instantly reliable, like he was genuinely happy to help. He had that rare quality of making you feel safe just by being there. He fixed my tire in minutes, wiped his hands clean, and offered to buy me the best, strongest coffee I'd ever tasted. I said yes, not because I was looking for romance, but because his quiet confidence was exactly what I needed that afternoon. From that day on, Owen was everywhere in my life, but in the best way possible. He was persistent, but never pushy. He would text me before work, ask about my complicated meetings, and sometimes show up at my office just to steal me away for a quick, comfortable lunch. He wasn't rich, but he was grounded, a software engineer with big, manageable dreams. He made me feel like I was the most important and interesting woman he had ever met. And after years of feeling invisible, that consistency was like a miracle. When he finally met my mother, a woman who rarely liked anyone, she looked at him and said to me, "Anya, that man is good. He truly loves the person you are." I finally allowed myself to believe it. We moved to Savannah, bought a cozy little house where the air smelled like Spanish moss and old hope, and started building our future. Every Sunday, we'd drive down to Beacon Beach. It was our special place, and he would tell me, "Just wait until we're married. We're going to buy a small place right here, near the water, and watch the waves every morning." I felt like I had finally found my peace, my quiet corner of the world. Then, about 5 months ago, the quiet corner was invaded. Sabine called. Owen was strange and quiet when he told me about it. He explained she was an old flame from his college days, someone he hadn't thought about in years, but she had tracked him down because she had been given a terrible diagnosis. Aggressive. Stage 4 cancer. She wanted to reconnect with everyone before she ran out of time. A tiny, painful knot of anxiety immediately formed in my stomach, but I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was secure, that I should be compassionate, and I even suggested we visit her together. He shot that idea down immediately. "No, Anya, she's too fragile. She only wants to see me alone for closure," he said, and the intensity in his eyes made me immediately suspicious. He promised it was just one visit, a simple act of kindness for a dying woman. But that promise felt thin and breakable the moment he made it. The visits didn't stop. He started coming home later and later. When I asked him where he had been, he would get that weary, martyr look on his face. "Sabine's chemo was difficult today," he'd explain. "She's all alone in that apartment. Her family isn't around. I can't just leave her to suffer. I tried to be the supportive partner, convincing myself that his compassion was a good thing. But the scent of a sweet floral perfume I didn't recognize started clinging to his clothes, a perfume that was so different from the light citrus I always wore. I tried to push down the fear, telling myself to be proud of his empathy. But when his helping turned into staying away more nights than he was home, the fear stopped being a whisper. It became a harsh, unrelenting voice in my head, a warning siren I couldn't silence anymore. The final piece of my world fell apart one evening when he came home looking defeated, like a soldier who had just received orders he hated. He sat on the edge of the bed and spoke the words that ended everything. Sabine doesn't have much time left, and Anya, her last wish. She wants to get married before she dies. I actually laughed out loud, a sharp, bitter sound, thinking it was some kind of sick joke. But he wasn't laughing. He looked at me with a face full of solemn duty. "She's dying, Anya," he repeated. "I can't say no to her last wish." My breath left my body. All our dreams, all our plans, the money we'd saved, the baby I'd given up, all of it vanished in that moment. "What about me?" I whispered, and he just looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "You'll be okay. You're strong. You'll understand later." That was the night I realized that Owen didn't love me conditionally. He just loved being the selfless hero, and I was the easy sacrifice he was willing to make. The first day Sabine moved into our house was the day I truly understood what a hostile takeover felt like. Owen insisted she needed constant care, claiming her treatments were too severe for her to manage alone. I was against it, but he put his foot down, using the guilt of her supposed terminal illness as his ultimate weapon. So there she was, draped in flowing shawls and wearing her expensive wool cap, looking frail and saintly, occupying the entire guest wing, the very wing we had planned to turn into our nursery one day. I remember watching them one morning. Owen was spoon-feeding her soup, looking entirely focused on her every breath, and she was gazing up at him with a look of pure, sickly devotion. I wanted to storm over and expose the lie, but I couldn't find the strength. Instead, I retreated into the role of the silent, supportive fiancé, dying a little more inside with every passing hour. Sabine was a brilliant tactician. She didn't have to yell or fight me. Her weapon was subtle, constant erosion. She made sure that every moment reminded me she was the winner, and the past was more important than the present. If I cooked Owen's favorite meal, she would sigh dramatically and say, "Oh, he told me I used to make this dish perfectly years ago. This version is fine." If I chose a movie for us to watch, she'd immediately suggest a different one that she and Owen had apparently loved together, using her illness to enforce her choice. Even worse, he started playing old CDs, music I had never heard him listen to, which she quickly identified as our breakup playlist. He didn't see the manipulation. He saw the sweet, frail victim making small, innocent comments. I saw a powerful actress systematically destroying my foundation, and he was too blind to see anything but his own reflection as her compassionate caregiver. The ultimate humiliation was about Beacon Beach. That place was sacred to us. It was the promise of our future and the symbol of my agonizing past. After I had the abortion, the choice I made because he convinced me we weren't financially ready, he swore he would take me to that beach to help me heal. But that trip never materialized. Now, suddenly, Sabine expressed her final wish, to see the Atlantic Ocean one last time at the very same spot. Owen immediately agreed, his face beaming with the pride of a man fulfilling a holy duty. "She just wants to see the waves one last time," he explained, hastily packing her bag. I stood there speechless, watching him prepare a trip for her that he had denied me for years. A trip that was supposed to help me overcome my grief. My pain meant nothing. My entire history with him was erased the moment she made her request. The night before they left for the beach, I couldn't stay inside. I sat out on the small backyard patio in the damp, heavy Savannah air, feeling utterly numb. I had no tears left to cry. Owen found me there, putting his hand on my shoulder. "You're amazing, Anya," he murmured, giving my hair a quick, detached pat. "Thank you for being so understanding of this difficult situation." Understanding. The word felt like a deliberate insult. I managed a tight, brittle smile, but every muscle in my body was screaming inside. The next morning, I watched them drive off. Her in the passenger seat, her head tilted, the edge of her wig fluttering briefly in the warm breeze like a tiny, arrogant flag of conquest. When they returned from the beach, the atmosphere between them was thicker, more intimate. Later that evening, while he was in the shower, I saw a new photo pop up on his phone screen. Sabine, standing by the ocean, her head tilted up, kissing him lightly on the cheek. He looked happy, relaxed, a look I hadn't seen on his face in months. He quickly snatched the phone away when he came out, muttering that it was just a quick photo for her memory book. But the photo wasn't just innocent. It was perfectly framed, perfectly timed, and completely unnecessary for a woman who was supposedly hours from death. That kiss told me everything. She wasn't dying. She was actively, aggressively stealing him, and he was letting her do it. In that moment, the silent agreement I had with myself ended. I was done being the silent victim, and I decided right then that my final act would be to ensure the truth found them both. My investigation started immediately. I stopped looking at Sabine through the lens of pity and started viewing her with cold forensic suspicion. The way she moved, the way she ate, the way she managed to always look fragile but never actually weak. None of it added up for a patient going through stage 4 chemo. The truth finally broke through on a Wednesday afternoon. Owen was at work, and the house was quiet. I walked past the guest wing and smelled something sharp and acrid, something utterly out of place in a sick room. I paused, recognized the scent, and pushed the door open. She was sitting by the window, not in bed, but completely alert, holding a lit cigarette between two perfectly steady fingers. She was on the phone, speaking in a normal, strong voice, a voice free of her usual breathless fragility. She saw me standing in the doorway, but didn't even try to hide the cigarette. She took a slow, deep drag, letting the smoke curl up to the ceiling before saying into the phone, her voice cold and triumphant, "Yes, it's all going to plan. He's completely hooked. The wedding is on, and Anya is falling apart exactly like I knew she would." My blood turned to ice. She hung up the phone with a slow, deliberate movement and looked at me, a cruel, satisfied smirk on her face. "Now you know," she said, raising an eyebrow. "And what are you going to do about it, sweetie?" I walked into the room and closed the door behind me, my voice low and dangerous, trembling not from fear, but from the raw fury that was finally unleashed. "I know you're lying, Sabine. I know you don't have cancer." She laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "And who exactly is going to believe you, the rejected fiancé? Owen thinks I'm a few weeks from death. He thinks you are nothing but a jealous, vicious complication. Tell him. Go on. By the time you get the first word out, I'll have a better, more convincing story to cover it up." I told her I would show him the truth, that I would make him see the fraud she was. She simply shrugged. "Do your worst. He needs to believe he's noble more than he needs to believe you." We were still locked in a venomous, silent standoff when we heard the sound of Owen's car pulling into the driveway. She moved with shocking, desperate speed. She grabbed the cigarette lighter she had been using and, without a moment of hesitation, pressed the hot metal directly against the delicate skin of her inner forearm, letting out a sharp, genuine cry of pain. Then, with a practiced, dramatic heave, she threw herself against the antique dresser, crashing to the floor in a flurry of shawls and tears. Owen burst through the door seconds later, dropping his work bag. "Sabine, what happened?" he shouted, rushing to her side. She pointed a shaking, tear-streaked finger at me. She tried to hurt me. She called me a liar and she pushed me. She's furious about the wedding." I stood there, utterly paralyzed by the sheer, breathtaking evil of the lie. I tried to explain, "Owen, she burned herself. It's a lie." But he wasn't even looking at me. His face was a mask of cold, condemning rage. "Get out, Anya. Get out of her room. I can't believe you would attack a sick woman." That night, he didn't even come close to our room. He slept on the sofa in the guest wing to protect her. A few days later, the final, agonizing insult arrived. They went wedding shopping at the high-end boutique in Atlanta, where I had reserved my wedding dress months ago. I drove there, watching from a distance, as she emerged from the dressing room, wearing the exact gown, the Parisian lace, the mermaid cut that I had spent months dreaming of. When I finally pulled Owen aside, my voice tight with humiliated disbelief, he looked at me, not with love, but with weary condescension. "Please, Anya, just let her have it. She might not live long enough to wear anything else. Just be the bigger person and find another dress." I gave up the dress, but I didn't find another one. Instead, I went straight back to my car, my mind clear and cold. My 7-day window to reverse the memory wipe was almost closed, and I knew I couldn't keep fighting a lie. I had one last plan. I gathered the audio recordings, the fraudulent medical reports, and the video of their kiss. I compiled every piece of evidence onto a small flash drive, sealed it with my memory wipe report, and took it straight to Dr. Silas. I told her to deliver the truth to Owen on his wedding day, a final, undeniable reckoning that I wouldn't even be around to remember. The 7-day clock was ticking down, and the memory effects were getting stronger, more alarming. I felt a subtle, unsettling emptiness where certain memories of Owen used to live. It was a bizarre kind of peace, like having a painful tooth slowly numbed until the ache was gone. The memory wipe was no longer a desperate act of grief. It was a tactical necessity, a vital operation to save my own sanity. I had started preparing for my real escape, securing my travel documents, and booking a one-way flight to Toronto, Canada, a place where no one knew Anya Petrova and the heartbreak she carried. The final element of my plan involved his career. Owen's high-paying job as a software engineer was entirely due to my connections. The company was owned by my cousin, Sergei, a detail Owen seemed to completely forget in his self-righteous mission. I called Sergei, not with a tearful plea, but with a flat, formal tone. I explained that Owen was marrying his ex-girlfriend on Saturday, breaking our 7-year engagement due to a terminal illness that was a complete fabrication. "Terminate his employment," I instructed Sergei. "The letter of dismissal needs to be delivered at the reception. I want him to understand that his misguided sense of duty comes with a very real, very high price." Sergei, who had always valued loyalty and clarity, didn't even argue. "It's done, Anya. Consider him gone." This wasn't petty revenge. It was about ensuring his betrayal was met with the highest possible financial and professional consequence. He wasn't just losing me. He was losing the future I had helped him build. Sabine, meanwhile, was savoring her final days of dominance. She increased her emotional blackmail, calling Owen to her room with agonizing pain flares. The moment he and I would try to have a strained, difficult conversation, it reached a breaking point one wet, thundering night, the same weather that had sent him rushing to her door in Chapter 1. I was huddled on the couch, shaking, tears finally coming from sheer physical fear of the lightning when her desperate cry for him came from the guest wing. He looked at me, saw my terror, and simply patted my shoulder with a cold, hollow gesture. "I have to go, Anya, he said, and he rushed off, leaving me utterly alone in the dark, thundering house. It was the ultimate cold confirmation that I was completely dispensable, a betrayal I knew my future self could never forget. The next day, my resolve became absolute. The memory wipe couldn't come fast enough. I'd already packed my most essential items, mailing off anything that held too much sentimental weight. The house was already starting to feel like a rental unit. I did a final check on the flash drive and the sealed report with Dr. Silas, making sure the package was secure and ready for its Saturday delivery. The final definitive moment came that evening. I walked into Sabine's room to ask her a logistical question about the utility bill, and the lights were low, but the scene was anything but sick. They were on the chaise lounge, entangled, their lips locked in a deep, undeniable kiss. It wasn't the chaste kiss of a sympathetic caregiver. It was the intense, passionate kiss of two lovers. Sabine opened her eyes while they were still kissing and looked directly at me over Owen's shoulder, her eyes full of pure, absolute, malicious triumph. I didn't scream or cry. I simply closed the door quietly, my hand completely steady on the knob. The betrayal was so complete, so shockingly blatant, that it instantly and permanently severed the last, fragile thread of my affection for him. The feeling wasn't anger. It was a cold, calm certainty. Owen Carmichael was no longer the man I loved or the man I hated. He was an obstacle that had been successfully removed. I walked back to my room, the final irrevocable thought settling in my mind. In just a few short days, he would be a total stranger, and I would be free. The morning of the wedding arrived with a strange, unnatural calm. The severe heat had broken, leaving behind a cool, clean breeze off the coast. The memory treatment had moved into its final, most intense stage. I found myself looking at a framed photo of Owen and me on the mantelpiece, recognizing the people but feeling no real connection to them. The emotional sting was completely gone, replaced by a dull, constant anticipation for the final break. I kept checking my phone, whispering the mantra, 7 days, it's almost over. Just a few more hours. The final insult arrived via a courier, the thick, expensive wedding invitation, addressed to me, Owen and Sabine. It was engraved in silver, announcing the ceremony at the historic chapel overlooking the ocean, followed by a reception at a luxury resort. It was an act of deliberate cruelty, a final victory lap for Sabine. But I looked at the card and felt nothing. It was just a piece of paper advertising an event I wouldn't attend, or rather one I would attend only in spirit, through the bomb I had already planted. I set the invitation down next to my sleek, black, already packed suitcase, which held everything I was taking to Toronto. Owen walked into the kitchen, dressed in a perfect, expensive suit, looking nervous but determined. He hadn't slept in our room for weeks, but seeing him there, preparing to marry another woman, was still a jarring, painful sight. He saw the invitation, then saw my suitcase by the door. "Anya," he started, his voice thick with the heavy guilt that only a man desperate for self-forgiveness can muster. I know this is terrible for you, but I have to do this. I have an obligation to her." I looked at him, not with pain, but with clinical detachment. He was a man consumed by his own need to be a martyr, too blind to see the lie wrapped up in a pretty silk bow. "I understand, Owen," I said, my voice steady and measured. The unexpected calm must have rattled him, because his face jerked up. You do," he stammered, his expression flickering between disbelief and relief. "Yes," I confirmed, walking over to pick up my new passport and documents. "You have to do what your conscience tells you, and I have to do what is right for my peace." I showed him the new visa and the flight information. "I'm leaving today, Owen. I'm starting a new life. I want you to be happy, and I want you out of my memory." His relief vanished, replaced by a complex, unsettled mix of alarm and belated shame. He hadn't expected dignity. He had expected a scene, a breakdown he could pity and then dismiss. "Anya, please don't leave like this," he stammered. "You don't have to go today. Why don't you come to the wedding, just for an hour? It would mean the world to Sabine. It would show her that there's no bad blood." The sheer nerve of the request, asking me to watch him marry his lying ex, was the most insulting thing he could have done, but it also offered the perfect dramatic exit. "I will follow you," I agreed, giving him a small, empty smile. "I have a few final things to take care of here. I promise I'll meet you there before the ceremony is over." He looked immensely relieved, a man who had successfully cleared his conscience with minimal effort. "Thank you, Anya. You are truly an extraordinary woman. He wrapped me in a brief, cold, meaningless hug, and then he was gone, off to marry the lie, leaving me alone in the house we had built, ready to erase his memory forever. I looked at the clock. The wedding was set for 1 p.m. My memory wipe would become permanent at 1:15 p.m. I waited until I heard the distant rumble of his car fade away. I picked up my suitcase, felt a final, lonely tear trace a path down my cheek, the last one I would ever shed for him, and headed for Dr. Silas's clinic. The drive to Dr. Silas's private clinic was strange, almost dreamlike. I was driving through the familiar streets of Savannah, but the details felt flat, two-dimensional, as if I were looking at a photograph instead of reality. The sense of creeping disorientation had intensified. I had to consciously check the clinic's sign to make sure I was at the right place, because the face of the man who had been my entire world for 7 years was already dissolving. I knew the name Owen Carmichael, but the accompanying memory, the sound of his laugh, the way he looked when he was stressed, was becoming slippery, like trying to hold smoke. I walked into the examination room, placing my suitcase by my feet. Dr. Silas met me, her expression a mix of professional resolve and deep, personal sadness. "Anya," she said, her voice dropping to a serious tone, "this is the final hour. The point of no return is in less than 20 minutes. Are you absolutely sure about this? Once we pass that 1:15 p.m. mark, your mind will be permanently restructured. You will not remember Owen. You will not remember your life with him. The pain will be gone, but so will the person who experienced it." I sat on the edge of the examination table and looked at her, my heart an empty vessel, but my resolve solid as stone. "I am certain, doctor," I replied, my voice measured and calm. "The pain of remembering a truth he refused to see is a weight I cannot carry for a new life. I need this peace. I have done everything to make sure the truth finds him. Now, I need to save myself." My entire purpose had narrowed down to this single final act of self-preservation. My part was over, and now it was time for the curtain to fall on my memory. "The package has been dispatched exactly as you instructed," Dr. Silas confirmed, checking her watch. "It is scheduled to arrive at the reception venue precisely as the wedding ceremony concludes. Are you sure you don't want to be there? To see the look on his face when he reads the report, when he realizes the full scope of Sabine's lie and his mistake?" I shook my head slowly, firmly. No, my final memory of him should not be one of vengeance. It should be one of silence. I want to be utterly, completely blank when that truth hits him. I want to be gone. I closed my eyes and allowed the cold metallic cap to be placed back onto my head. The digital clock on the wall read 1:05 p.m. The wedding vows were being exchanged right now. My life was moments away from a total reboot. As the low electrical hum of the machine started up, I felt a dizzying internal pressure, a strange flickering of images. Owen smiling at me across a crowded restaurant. Owen proposing on New Year's Eve. Owen's face pale with fear when I was sick. All the images were like old photographs being dipped into acid, the colors blurring, the faces fading. A strange, abstract sorrow washed over me, a feeling of loss that wasn't about him, but about the pure history that was being erased. The clock ticked past the deadline, 1:15 p.m. The machine whined and then powered down. Dr. Silas removed the cap, and I opened my eyes. I looked around the room, at the doctor, and then back at the clock. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice filled with apprehension. I sat up, stood, and tested the feeling. I felt incredibly light, almost weightless. "I feel empty," I told her, the words sounding perfectly fine. "What happens now?" "Now," Dr. Silas said gently, a relieved, careful smile spreading across her face. "You walk out of this room, you go to the airport, and you start your new life, Anya. Your past ends here, and your future is entirely yours." I picked up my suitcase. Owen Carmichael was no longer a person. He was a name I recognized, but a face without an emotion. The profound silence where the searing pain used to be was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I walked out of the clinic, leaving my 7-year memory behind me forever. The wedding ceremony, held at the historic First Christian Church in Savannah, had been meticulously planned, a perfect heartless production built on a web of beautiful lies. Owen, utterly oblivious to the bomb I had planted, stood at the altar, his face a mixture of strained nobility and misplaced pride as he looked at Sabine. She was radiant in a white dress, my dress, her eyes shining with the self-satisfied glow of a conqueror. The minister spoke sacred words of devotion, words that were a profound and absolute mockery of the situation, while I was hours into my new, empty life. As the couple was pronounced husband and wife, 2 separate, simultaneous events were set into motion. As I was walking into the airport, checking in my suitcase and documents for my one-way flight, a discreet courier, dressed in professional uniform, walked into the wedding reception. He located Caleb, Owen's best man and business colleague, and informed him that a large, sealed envelope had to be delivered to Owen immediately following the first dance. Owen and Sabine were announced, and the room erupted in applause, the sound of their triumph. During the obligatory, highly symbolic first dance, Sabine leaned into Owen, whispering something that made him beam, a proud, self-congratulatory smile spreading across his face. She had won, stolen him, and humiliated her rival in one fell swoop. She was, in that moment, untouchable. Then, as the song ended, Caleb approached, his face strangely serious. "Owen," he said, handing him the heavy, sealed package. "This just arrived. It's marked extremely urgent, delivered at exactly this time." Owen, still floating on the high of his supposed moral victory, took the package with a slightly annoyed wave. "Can't it wait, man? I just got married." "It says it absolutely cannot wait," Caleb insisted, stepping back. Something in his tone, a cold gravity, finally cut through Owen's self-absorption. He tore open the envelope. The first thing he pulled out was a single, stark document, Anya Petrova's signed memory wipe report, complete with the timestamp of 1:15 p.m., confirming the procedure was complete and permanent. Owen's face instantly went white, the blood draining away, making his eyes look huge and panicked. He read the summary. Patient willingly underwent full erasure of all memories pertaining to one Owen Carmichael and all related shared history. Sabine, seeing the horrific change in his expression, reached for the document, but Owen pulled it away. Then he pulled out the flash drive and the short, handwritten note from Dr. Silas. "This contains the truth you dismissed, Owen. The consequences of your misplaced compassion are now yours to live with." Ignoring the guests, ignoring his new bride, Owen stumbled to a quiet corner and frantically plugged the flash drive into his phone. The first file he opened was the audio recording. He heard Sabine's voice, clear, cold, and utterly devoid of illness, talking about her successful scheme and her victorious laughter. "It's working perfectly. He's completely hooked." Then he opened the video file, the high-resolution footage of their passionate kiss, caught on the hidden camera I had planted, the ultimate proof of their ongoing affair. The final file was the forensic proof. Her cancer reports were entirely fake. The staggering realization hit him like a violent blow. He hadn't been a hero. He had been a massive, foolish idiot who had systematically destroyed the woman who truly loved him to marry a cruel lie. He stumbled back out of the corner, his eyes wide with a terrifying panic, looking directly at Sabine, who was now approaching, her face morphing from confused concern to absolute terror as she recognized the documents in his hand. But before he could speak, a waiter approached him with a small, formal envelope on a silver platter. It was a letter printed on the letterhead of his company, the dismissal notice, termination of employment, effective immediately. His career, his fiancé, his entire world, all vanished in the space of 1 minute. The massive ballroom of the luxury resort went dead silent. The joyous music replaced by a shocking, unnatural quiet. Owen stood there, utterly paralyzed, the papers trembling in his hand, his eyes locked on Sabine. Her triumphant look had entirely vanished, replaced by a desperate, trapped ferocity. The combined weight of my memory wipe, her elaborate lie, his job loss, and his own moral failure had created an explosion that destroyed everything. "Sabine," he managed to rasp out, his voice thin and broken. "The cancer, it was a complete lie." He held up the memory wipe report, the final cold proof of my escape. "And Anya is gone. She literally erased me from her mind for this." He didn't wait. He immediately started playing the audio of her phone call, her cold, victorious laughter echoing through the silent, shocked ballroom. The sound was an absolute, undeniable condemnation. Sabine's facade finally shattered. She didn't cry gentle tears. She started screaming in a loud, angry, hysterical fit. "She's lying, Owen. That psycho doctored those files. She's obsessed and trying to ruin you because you left her. It's her revenge!" she shrieked, desperate to regain control of the narrative, her voice reaching a frantic, ugly pitch. The guests, initially just watching, began to mutter and gasp, the realization of the horrifying scam dawning on them. Owen's friend, Caleb, walked forward, his face grim. "It's over, Sabine. The company already confirmed the fraud. Sergei, Anya's cousin, owns the company. The termination letter went out the second the ceremony finished. Owen, you have nothing left. No job, no wife, no fiancé." The devastating reality of his financial and personal ruin hit Owen like a massive wave. Buckling his knees, the lie had cost him everything he had spent 7 years building. Owen turned his full, desperate, burning gaze on Sabine. "You staged a deathbed. You played the dying woman. You used me. You used my loyalty to run this disgusting scam." He pointed to the burn mark on her hand, the mark she had inflicted on herself to blame me. "Did you burn yourself for the drama, too? Was the fall staged? Everything was a lie." Sabine, seeing the absolute crushing emptiness in his eyes, knowing the rich career and stability she had married him for were instantly gone, stopped screaming and became viciously honest. "You did this to yourself, Owen. You were so desperate to be the good man, the heroic savior, that you needed to believe the lie. You left Anya alone in a thunderstorm because you couldn't resist the glory of saving the dying maiden. You chose the lie because it made you feel important. You are the biggest fool in this room." Her cruel, raw truth was aimed not at the crowd, but directly at the deep, fundamental weakness in his character. Owen recoiled, as if she had physically struck him. The vicious accuracy of her final truth, the collective judgment of the silent, watching guests, the complete, final, and inescapable humiliation. It all converged. He had been so obsessed with his own idea of nobility that he had destroyed the woman who loved him and walked willingly into a trap. He looked around the room, no longer seeing a celebration but a gallery of judging faces, his shame total and absolute. He turned abruptly, pushed blindly through the stunned crowd, and fled the ballroom, leaving the furiously screaming Sabine and the complete wreckage of his life behind him. I stepped off the plane in Toronto, Canada, and the cold Canadian air felt clean and sharp on my skin. The city lights were bright, but the real light was the beautiful emptiness in my head. I was officially Anya Petro, a woman with a new legal name and no emotional history attached to her past 7 years. I had no pain, no sorrow, only a profound, silent calm. The old me was gone, and this new person was ready to start over. The first few hours were purely logistical, the kind of tasks that required no emotion, only focus. I found the small apartment Dr. Silas had helped me arrange near the University of Toronto, a quiet place chosen for its anonymity. The key was in a lockbox, and the place was simple and clean. I started unpacking the few essential boxes I had carried with me. The process felt like setting up a stage for a play I hadn't written yet, but the emptiness, while peaceful, was strange. As I unpacked, I found a small, familiar object in a side pocket of my purse that I must have grabbed without thinking, a tiny metal keychain shaped like a lighthouse, the kind they sell at souvenir shops near the water. I picked it up, feeling the cool metal, and a wave of profound confusion washed over me. I knew what it was, but I didn't know why I owned it. It was a fragment of a lost story, a piece of a puzzle with all the surrounding pieces deliberately destroyed. It was a ghost in the machine of my mind. I used the burner phone I had purchased, another small planned detail, to call Dr. Silas. Her voice, when she answered, was guarded but warm. "Anya, thank God. How are you? Are you safe?" "I'm here," I confirmed. "I'm fine. I'm empty, which is good. But I found this." I described the lighthouse keychain to her. "Why do I have it? It feels important, but I have absolutely no memory of buying it or where it's from." I could hear her sigh softly on the other end of the line. "Anya, the treatment was never going to be perfect. Certain deep emotional anchors, places, repeated symbols can sometimes leave a residual echo. You associate that lighthouse with a profound turning point, a powerful emotional concept, but the person and the specific story tied to it are gone. That is exactly what we wanted." "And Owen?" I asked, testing the sound of the name. It felt hollow, like calling out a random word. "He received the package, Anya, at his wedding reception. It was a complete disaster, a massive public scene. He knows everything. He knows Sabine was lying. He knows what you did to escape him. And he knows he lost his job. He's called here repeatedly, frantic, desperate, trying to find you. The news of his devastation should have been a satisfying surge of power, a feeling of sweet revenge. But it wasn't. I felt only a mild intellectual curiosity, like hearing about a character in a news report. "And what did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him you had left the country and that your memory of him is irrevocably gone. I told him he should focus on the undeniable truth you left him, not the woman he destroyed." She paused, her voice softening. "He is utterly broken, Anya. He finally sees the full scope of what he threw away for a performance." "Good," I said, the word coming out flat and without emotion. "I am glad he has the truth. Now I can have my peace." I thanked her and hung up, placing the lighthouse keychain on the nightstand. It was no longer a symbol of Owen or Beacon Beach. It was a reminder of my own fortitude, a small, cold monument to the fact that I survived. I had traded 7 years of pain for this absolute silence. Now I could finally sleep, not as a woman haunted by betrayal, but as a woman preparing for a first day of class. Back in Savannah, the days following the disastrous wedding were pure hell for Owen. He hadn't gone home from the reception. He couldn't face the house that now stood as a silent, terrible testament to his monumental failure. He spent the night driving around aimlessly, the audio of Sabine's cold, mocking laughter playing on repeat, the memory wipe report clutched in his hand like a final, unholy scripture. He was in denial, desperate, and utterly ruined. The next morning, his first and only thought was to undo the damage. He went straight to Dr. Silas's clinic, pounding on the door until she let him in. He looked completely defeated, his expensive wedding suit crumpled, his eyes raw and red. "Doctor, please," he begged, falling into a chair. "Tell me where she is. The reversal, there has to be a time limit. You can reverse it, right? Tell me where Anya is. I have to explain to her. I have to tell her I know the truth now." Dr. Silas, her expression weary but firm, did not move. "There is no reversal, Owen. You had a 7-day window. You spent those 7 days marrying the woman who was lying to you, while Anya was preparing her final escape. The procedure is permanent." She placed a copy of my new work visa on her desk. "She left the country. She is legally a new person now. You are a stranger to her, Owen, a forgotten ghost." "But she's my fiancé. 7 years. We had a life," he cried out, his voice shaking with the terrible realization of his loss. "A fiancé you dismissed for a lie. You called her selfish when she tried to fight for you. You asked her to give up her dress for a woman who was actively mocking your misplaced compassion. She gave you the truth, the full, documented proof, and you still chose to defend the lie. She decided that living with the memory of that kind of cruelty was a burden she couldn't carry. She chose her own peace over you, Owen, and you are entirely responsible for forcing that choice." He finally drove back to our house. But the reality was worse than the imagination. The driveway was empty. Inside, the house was silent and cold. Every trace of Anya Petrova was gone. Her clothes, her books, her makeup, all meticulously removed. The only thing left was the wedding planner on the coffee table, a blank white canvas where the plans for our honeymoon should have been. He picked it up, and a small forgotten photograph fell out, a candid shot of us laughing together at Beacon Beach years ago. He stared at the picture, trying to call up the feeling, the specific connection of that moment. But all he felt was the massive, crushing weight of his failure. His friends and family were of no help. When he tried to tell them the unbelievable dramatic story of Sabine's fake cancer and my ultimate revenge, they looked at him with a mixture of pity and deep skepticism. The truth was so outlandish, so much like a movie plot, that it sounded like the desperate ravings of a man who had finally lost his mind after a very public, humiliating disaster. No one, not even his mother, could move past the fact that he had chosen a deathbed marriage over his 7-year commitment. His reputation was ruined, his career gone, and his house was now just a monument to a betrayal he was too self-absorbed to see. He began a desperate, obsessive search, emailing any connection he could think of in Canada, trying to find a trace of Anya Petro. He wasn't trying to win me back. He was trying to undo the memory wipe, to face the woman who knew him, to receive the forgiveness he desperately needed, to make himself feel less guilty. But the Anya he was searching for was gone forever. He was chasing a ghost of his own creation, a woman he had forced to rebuild herself without him. The bitter, agonizing irony was inescapable. The man who had casually dismissed her pain was now utterly and completely destroyed by his own. My first 3 months in Toronto were a period of intense focus and rebuilding. I didn't just rebuild a life, I built a new self from scratch. The master's program in international relations was absorbing and demanding, forcing my mind to focus on complex global issues, leaving no space for personal baggage. I made new friends, people who knew nothing of the broken woman named Anya Petrova from Savannah. They knew Anya Petro, a focused, resilient, and confident new student, with an easy laugh and a quiet, unshakable certainty about her future. The emptiness where Owen used to live was the key to my peace. It was a clean slate, a space of pure, unburdened potential. I didn't have to fight crippling memories of lost love, and I had no emotional ghosts to banish. The lighthouse keychain still sat on my nightstand, a silent, beautiful enigma. I had learned to accept it not as a painful memory, but as an emblem of my own fierce strength, a reminder of the ultimate sacrifice I made to guarantee my freedom. One cold evening, as the first proper snow of the Canadian winter was starting to fall on the University of Toronto campus, I was sitting in a cozy, warm coffee shop, studying for an upcoming exam. My burner phone, the one I used only for occasional communication with Dr. Silas, buzzed with a text message. It was her. The message was short and final. He's stopped looking. He's accepted the truth. You won, Anya. You are finally, absolutely free. I read the text, and for the first time since that terrible night in the thunderstorm, a powerful, deep emotion washed over me. It wasn't the blazing heat of revenge, nor was it the gentle ache of sadness. It was a powerful, all-encompassing sense of closure. The story was finally finished. The man who had been so self-absorbed and so painfully blind had finally been forced to confront the terrible consequences of his mistake and the magnitude of the truth. He had lost his love, his career, and his reputation, all because he chose to be the star in a disgusting fake drama. I finished my coffee, packed my books, and walked out into the falling snow, feeling the cold, clean air on my face. The city lights of Toronto felt bright and full of infinite possibility, and the promise of a future I was entirely in charge of lay ahead of me. Unburdened and limitless. I didn't look back. There was nothing to look back to. I was Anya Petro, A woman who had faced the most painful betrayal imaginable and responded not with tears, but with cold, calculated strategy and absolute self-preservation. I didn't just walk away. I launched myself into a new life. The 7 years were not wasted. They were the high cost of the most valuable lesson I would ever learn. Never, ever allow your dignity to be controlled by a man who values his own ego over your genuine well-being. I smiled, a real, genuine, and deeply peaceful smile that reached my eyes. The war was over. The operation was a complete success. My new life had begun, and it was the most glorious, peaceful silence I had ever known. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of my story, now that Owen knows the truth. If you had one final simple sentence to say to him, one thing you would want him to truly understand about the consequences of his actions, what would it be? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's find strength in this final moment of justice and healing.